Conversations across time. Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Good evening. I am Lyndon Baines Johnson, the 36th President of the United States. I, have, I am appearing on this show to discuss my experiences in the House of Representatives when the Speaker was Sam Rayburn and the President was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and how that shaped me into being able to handle the House and the Senate, so I can help to push through uh, the initial start of the New Deal, and then later on the Great Society and the New Frontier under President Lyndon John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and and how those programs were essential in dealing with poverty and preventing social upheavals.
Hello, I'm President Theodore Roosevelt Jr., 26th President of the United States, sometimes referred to as Teddy and sometimes referred to as TR. I was born into great wealth, but I'm most remembered for what I did for the average person. I was very progressive in my policies by busting up the trust that ran rampant over the economy in the early 20th century. I learned from my experiences working with the people, being a soldier in the Spanish-American War and being side by side with the common people. And I used my power to try and create equality of everyone. And we'll discuss that today and how all of these things are seen in the light of today's situation and problems. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. I was Associate Justice of the Supreme Court from 1902 till 1920. I was appointed by fellow panel member, President Theodore Roosevelt. I am best noted for my view of the First Amendment and the limitations on the First Amendment. I coined the phrase clear and present danger, and the example I gave was you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater if there's no fire. And that would be very applicable to what happened January 5th in the Capitol building.
Wow. Good evening and welcome to another episode of Conversations Across Time. You've met our guest. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Tonight's topic is a continuation of last week's topic, and that is capitalism. Is it working? And that being said, President Johnson, you mentioned that you were, when you first came to Washington, D.C., you arrived as a young congressman, and you were a part of working towards President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. You want to give us some background on that?
Certainly, ma'am. As I've stated previously, when I was a teacher at the Wellhausen Mexican School, I noticed all these children, boys and girls who are going to school, but they're going to go nowhere, literally nowhere, due to the color of their skin. And I thought that was a tragedy. And that I could not accept that. I had some racist attitudes, I'll admit, but I was able to see the humanity in these dark-skinned young people.
These young people that had no future, that had no future.
That's right. And if they have no future, they, to the extreme up, they have nothing to lose. And so I had to do something for, and I noticed, I knew all about uh, the poverty and unemployment following the crash of 1929. Poverty was rampant, and extremists in the right, the fascists of that era, and the Communist Party were gaining momentum, gaining some followers. Not really a threat to the government unless you count the Wall Street coup that certain Wall Street financiers were plotting to organize an army to overthrow President Franklin Roosevelt. And it took a very courageous and patriotic Marine Corps officer, General Smedley Butler, to repress it. But the lesson I have learned is that if you give working and low-income people the opportunity to rise higher in life, either with education or a good paying job and the ability to have good housing and good medical care, a lot of social problems can be relieved, and the danger of upheaval and revolution and extremism could be greatly reduced. But now we're in an era where, ever since Mr. Reagan attained the presidency, taxes were, this tax system was fixed to benefit the most wealthy and the corporations, so much that such a huge company as General Electric not only paid no taxes, but they had a tax refund. And there's a few others like that.
I'd like to get that deal if I could.
Don't we all, Ms. Crawford?
Yes. So now President Roosevelt, as a person who was labeled a progressive, your ideas would seem antithetical to your wealth. It would seem as though one would be surprised, and one is surprised to see how committed you were to a, what did you call it? I think you called it a fair deal. Was it a fair deal that you?
Fair deal, yes.
Fair deal.
Well, because the fact that I was born into a wealthy existence didn't diminish the fact that there were so many people in this country, the richest country in the world, even at that time, that were not living up to the standard, that weren't able to live up to the adequate standards that were necessary to have a profitable life, a good life. And it bothered me. I mean, I took an oath as the president to protect the people and do everything I can for the people, not just the wealthy people. I know that for a long time, it seemed like the Republicans, all the Republicans, that's all they cared about. Tax breaks for the wealthiest taxpayers, and subsidies for the oil companies when they had oil to sell at high prices to everybody, and they were still getting subsidies. Subsidies to the farmers when for whatever reason there was a bad winter. I mean, they were giving subsidies to everybody, but they weren't giving subsidies to the people that really needed it. And the people that really need it don't want subsidies. They just want an equal opportunity to be able to get their share of what is fair, and that's why it's the fair deal, what's fair in this country. And that persists today. And unfortunately, because of the political system where the minority has a tremendous pull over everything. I mean, the general populace has the same ideas that I had. However, they're thwarted by those people that still are represented, who represent the wealthiest people, whose political lives depend on it because they're supported by the large corporations and wealthy people. So the lobbying, all of those campaign contributions, gerrymandering, so that they're able to get things done.
it's a combination of horrible things that have allowed the wealthy to allow the wealth gap to get as wide as it has.
Right. They continue to do it. They have the money to do it. And unfortunately, the system allows them to do it. You look at Citizens United.
I was just getting ready to ask Justice Holmes.
Right. Just talked to Justice Holmes about that. I doubt that he would have voted for that.
Justice,
No, I wouldn't have. And I would have dissented on that. The fact of the matter is, I'm a Republican also, not as progressive as President Roosevelt. I believe that President Roosevelt would be drummed out of the Republican Party today. And
I think President Roosevelt would be a Democrat today. That's what I think. But that's
right.
beside
And the thing is that the power that the capitalistic class has, and it's interesting because what Citizens United did was say that corporations are people and have the same political rights as any individual has. But when it comes to responsibility, the same judges and the same Republican hierarchy that wanted the corporations to be considered people for campaign contributions and donations don't want them to be considered people in terms of being able to be sued or held. They do. So the hypocrisy that has permeated American politics today is absolutely unbelievable, and that there may be a realignment of the parties. In fact, President Roosevelt did go through that. He mentioned, I think last week, about that he had to run as an independent third-party candidate in a progressive ticket, which they called, the bull moose, because he was as strong and as virile as a bull moose. But that may have to happen again today to save the country.
Well, sure. Let me just say this: all the noise in the country comes from the extremes on both sides, from the far left and the far right, and everybody in the middle gets basically screwed because they're the ones that get all the publicity, and they're the ones that get the right to say whatever they want to say. And whenever anybody in the middle wants to say what they think is right, and by the way, what most people believe in, they get drowned out by all of that noise. So all of that has to stop. It's all a part of the political process that has to be revolutionized.
Yes, and as I see it, the thing, if I were on the court today, the thing that would cause me the greatest amount of concern is that we're moving toward minority rule. I always believed that even in the courts and how we interpreted the Constitution, the rights of the people were supreme. And if the people wanted something, even if it wasn't the best thing, even if it wasn't maybe the most sane thing, that the people in a democracy deserve to have it. And what we're having now is we have minority rule where vast majorities of the people, overwhelming majorities, want background checks on guns, or want social programs. And the people in power, especially in the Senate with the filibuster rule, won't let it happen. So you have a very small majority of people controlling policy for what is needed for the vast majority.
It's absolutely true, because in the Senate, even though it's split 50-50, the 50% of the Democrats represent about 60% of the populace, and the 50% of the Republicans represent 40%.
Yeah.
And then with the filibuster, and you need 60 votes to pass something, it's like saying that a super minority, an unbelievable minority of people, 75% of the people in the country could want something, and the minority could squash it. So that's not democracy.
President Johnson, how does he feel? Because as someone who was a consummate vote counter and able to get what he wanted from opposing viewpoints, how do you feel about the Supreme Court today?
Well, it goes to show you that these learned justices, with all due respect to Justice Holmes, are political appointees with the political opinions about who the law and who the government should benefit. Like you take the Citizens United case. Mm-hmm. It's based on this premise that millions of dollars in campaign contributions are some sort of free speech, which means that a plutocrat that donates $1 million has a louder, way far louder voice than a working person who can just contribute $10. And democracy is definitely in jeopardy when that happens.
Yep.
Well, the perfect example is the voting rights bill that's been proposed by the Democrats now. It's a terrific bill that allows everybody a chance to vote, which is what democracy is about. And yet it's opposed 100% by the Republicans. They want to put all kinds of blockades on people voting, people of color, poor people, whatever. They just want their people to vote. They just want to win everything, and they don't care how they do it. And they use the system, and they con the system and work the system to their benefit. It's just like when they had, you talk about the filibuster. Well, there was a filibuster for Supreme Court justice votes too, but they did away with that. The Republicans did away with it when they had the majority in the Senate, so that they could get their Supreme Court justices with 51 votes. And as a consequence, you see the Supreme Court is now 6 conservatives and 3, basically progressives. And by the way, when there was an opportunity for Obama to name a Supreme Court justice, he had a year to go in his presidency, because the Senate had a majority of the senators, they stopped his appointment, and that seat was eventually taken by a conservative. So there's so many things that the Democrats
point out that that last year when Mr. the other guy was running for re-election, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, and the Republicans in the Senate were determined, hell-bent on getting one of theirs in the Senate just before Justice Ginsburg was called in the grave. I mean, not waiting for the next president to make the appointment. And it's like hypocrisy anymore is a virtue in the Republican Party.
I don't think I could have been confirmed if they had the filibuster for judges when I was nominated by President Roosevelt.
You don't think you would be confirmed?
Not if I needed 60 votes in the Senate. I don't think I would have been confirmed. When I was on the Massachusetts Supreme Court, I wrote some decisions that a lot of the conservative senators didn't like. So I don't think I could have been confirmed under those circumstances.
I think we ought to discuss in our next segment what the Democrats can do to force the hand of the Republicans, so that the majority could actually be implemented. And I think that's really a good discussion for another time. But
I think you're right. And the key is, and I think what President Johnson's saying and what President Teddy Roosevelt's saying, and I'm going to say this, is capitalism and democracy go hand in hand. And to make capitalism better, to use social programs that President Johnson used and President Roosevelt used, and to open up, President Roosevelt was a progressive. He favored the graduate income tax, voting rights way back then in 1910 and 1908.
Exactly.
The fact of the matter is, if capitalism crashes and the oligarchs start to rule, we're not going to have the democracy either.
Right. I agree 100% with that.
Democracy, excuse me, gentlemen, but I say that democracy, capitalism anymore, what's that anymore? When I was working on the New Deal and the Great Society, capitalism was a factory and its workers building products for the owner of the factory to sell. But capitalism anymore is just finance capitalism, which just fattens the coffers of corporate CEOs and corporate board members, and they don't get rich by building up companies. They sell portions of the company in bits and pieces, and with the tax money, with the money they saved on taxes due to the tax bill of 2017 and earlier, they didn't invest in new plant or hiring new workers. They used it to stash it in foreign bank accounts and buy up more stock in their corporation, so the value of the stock would rise.
May I ask this? May I invite you gentlemen back next week so that we can have a discussion on the impact of labor and the decline of the labor movement, and in terms of where we are now with capitalism? Because one of the things that the labor movement did assure was that people were able to work and assure themselves of a better life, and because they got compensated for the work that they did. So if you would indulge me and come back next week and let us pick up on talking about that, because I see what is happening now with the proposal, President Biden's proposal for his infrastructure bill. I see that as an opportunity for labor to reemerge, because we're talking about blue collar jobs, and I think that may be something that can possibly help to save capitalism. Because as it stands right now, I think we are all in agreement that capitalism is in danger of no longer existing because of the power that the minority rule has been able to exert over the majority of the population. Is that possible? Can we do that next?
Absolutely, sure.
We have to come back.
Yes, we can discuss
My
it.
pleasure.
Okay. And I thank you so much for joining us tonight. I thank you, the audience, for coming back, and I would like you to come back next week so that we can pick up a conversation about labor. We are very clear that capitalism is something that goes hand in hand with democracy, as President Johnson said. We will cease to have a democracy if we do not rein in the leaders who are allowing capitalism to just run rampant. This was never the idea or design of this country. So I thank you so much. This has been Conversations Across Time. Join us next week, and my guests will return, and we will have maybe some solutions, maybe some suggestions that we can offer to President Biden. Thank you. I am Vivian Crawford. Thank you so much, Justice Holmes. Thank you so much, President Johnson. Thank you so much, President Roosevelt. Good night.
Thank you.
Conversation across time. Conversation across.